Thank you. Peel was in the first rank of 19th century statesmen. He carried Catholic emancipation, he repealed the Corn Laws, he created the modern Conservative Party on the ruins of old Toryism. So wrote A.J.P. Taylor, who was not by any stretch of the imagination an ideological sympathiser either of Sir Robert or indeed of the classical liberal principles we just heard adumbrated. But in Taylor's formulation, you see the basic disadvantage that Robert Peel is under in a debate of this kind. He is by far the most remote from us in time. And as a result, it can be difficult to grasp the magnitude of his accomplishment. When we modern people think of Catholic emancipation, the extraordinary thing to us is not that it passed, but that it ever needed to pass in the first place. And by the way, I say we modern people very loosely. That was a point made by the Economist's own Walter Bagehot in his famous essay on Peel in 1856, a mere 27 years after the passage of the Emancipation. So that's the basic problem that we have in a balloon debate, we Peelites. But let me put before you, ladies and gentlemen, three achievements of such benign vastness that I think they dwarf what followed. First, Robert Peel created the idea of the policeman as an unarmed citizen in uniform with no more power than you or me, except insofar as those powers might be temporarily bestowed on him by a magistrate. Second, Robert Peel created the modern Conservative Party as a liberal, moderate, and democratic force. And third, he abolished the Corn Laws and indeed a number of other tariffs and trade restrictions, thereby elevating Britain to the highest pinnacle of wealth with a particularly benign impact on people on low income. So I want to take those in order, starting with the police. You don't have to look very far to see police forces which are regarded as agencies of, if not always repression, at least of state power. The fact that we have the friendly and open relationship between British bobbies and the British public is, as that affectionate nickname recalls, an achievement of the man who created the Metropolitan Police as Home Secretary. Peel was, I think all contemporaries acknowledged, the greatest administrator of his generation. And it was his brilliant mind that set out the 9 principles which policing has been governed by since. Principles that I think still work today, that prevention is better than repression, that the authority of the police depends on public confidence, that persuasion and warning are always to be preferred to physical force, and that it's not for the police to usurp the functions of the judiciary and to seek to establish guilt or innocence. Look even at what's happening in countries as close to us culturally as the United States, and you will see that we have cause to be cheerful to the generous-minded Lancastrian. Creation of the Conservative Party. Now, this one might seem obvious for those watching who are Conservative supporters. Oldest and most successful party in discovered space. But what about the many, probably the majority watching, who are not Conservative supporters? Why should you regard the creation of the Conservative Party in 1834 as an achievement? Well, let me put it like this, as a Conservative myself. I have often felt cause to be grateful for the character of our chief left of centre party in this country. I've written many times that you don't have to look far to see leftist parties that are steeped in bloodshed and revolution, that thought that they would only be successful when the last king had been strangled with the bowels of the last priest. That was not the tradition of our Labour Party, which was born rather in working men's libraries and nonconformist churches and the temperance movement and brass bands and so on. I would ask you, non-conservatives, to apply a similar test to our chief right of centre party. Compare it throughout most of the 19th century to what conservatism was in France, in Spain, in Germany, in Russia. You will find there that the character of conservatism tended to be autocratic, authoritarian, obscurantist, illiberal, and anti-democratic. The fact that we have a Conservative Party prepared to move with the times goes back to the Tamworth Manifesto, where, as Peel wrote in inspired language, he was appealing to that great and intelligent class of society, less interested in the contentions of party than in the maintenance of order and the cause of good government, and which promised the correction of proved abuses, and the redress of real grievances. Finally, and most impressively, free trade. Has any policy done more to elevate and enrich our species? Removing barriers between businesses and their customers ended the racket whereby the poor were subsidizing the rich. It was Peel's achievement that led to Britain being elevated above the run of nations. Victorian visitors from overseas were always struck by the extraordinary standard of living of the poorest people in this country, because free trade, it was a difficult argument to win then, still a difficult one to win now. Free trade, although it benefits everyone, benefits those on low incomes the most. And it was extraordinary that Peel, in pursuit of that enrichment, destroyed the party that he'd created, put it out of office for a generation, paid a price that none of the other candidates tonight, with the partial exception of Gladstone on Home Rule, came close to paying. So Peel, the man who took us from an aristocratic, mildly corrupt ancien regime into a modern meritocracy, offers us Gladstone's high-mindedness without his pomposity. He offers us Thatcher's drive without her stubbornness, her occasional humorlessness, Churchill's extraordinary patriotism and belief in this country without the melancholy, long withdrawing roar of the second term. Indeed, Peel's second term was arguably the most successful of any prime minister ever. He offers us Lloyd George's charisma without his genial corruption. And on the subject of the priapic little Welshman, it's worth just noting parenthetically that Peel was a model as a husband and father. His relationship with his wife Julia was a deeply beautiful love story. When he died, the Times, again, not a natural supporter, had the following to say. Under Providence, Peel has been our chief guide from the confusions and darkness that hung around the beginning of this century to the quiet haven in which we are now embayed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, is the true magnitude of his achievement. All of the other candidates tonight enlarged liberty. All of them were able to function in a polity which elevated the individual above the collective and which elevated the rules above the rulers. But it was Sir Robert Peel who created that polity.